Welcome to our comic corner, a comic oasis, or gateless comic oasis, where all are welcome. My name is Damon Gray, and today we have a very special guest. She is an Eisner Award-winning writer, worked on countless titles with Marvel, including Captain Marvel, Black Widow, Spider-Man, Hawkeye, and it's Jeff. She has a new series coming out called Black Cloak, hitting the shelves in January with Image Comics. And did I mention an Eisner Award-winning writer? We welcome to the Comic Corner, Kelly Thompson.
Thank you so much for having me. You've been such an incredible supporter of my work. I honestly don't know what I'd do without you. Thank you.
It's an honor. It is. I've been very vocal, Kelly. You're my favorite writer.
Oh my
Straight
God.
up, my
It's
favorite
honestly,
writer. Every work you've done, I've loved. I actually went back to go read one of your older books, Heart in a Box, which I say older books. It's only like 7 years old at this point.
yeah, but it's my
I
first thing. So yeah,
I,
it's,
I read that last night and loved it. We'll talk about that in a bit. But I want to know more about you. The whole point of the show is to get newer comic fans and have them learn more about the writers and the artists and anyone in the comic industry so they feel welcome too. It is not just so overwhelming. And I know for a lot of them, getting into comics is so tough. It's daunting. So how did you get in this space?
Well, I mean, I agree with you. First of all, I love your mission statement. I think it's great. I'm a very big fan of the idea of like growing the industry. That's why I think kids' books are so important. And like, I don't care if they don't make money for like Marvel and DC. Like, just let them be investments in your future. Like, I know that's easy for me to say because I don't have to write the checks, but I do think it's I do think it's almost a little bit their responsibility to try their best to build those books. It's why I love seeing things like It's Jeff at Marvel, and why I love seeing a lot of the more YA stuff that DC has been doing. Um, it's been really exciting. But I mean, I really agree with you. I think it's a very hard hobby to get into. Variant covers alone make it, and I'm an even bigger offender of this than I meant to be for Black Cloak, because we basically had a screw up where none of our covers, I'm sure it's my fault because it was my first time doing it and there were a lot of rules and regulations and I missed something, and so we didn't get any of our covers listed for incentives, which I don't care that much about it, but that can really hurt your numbers. And so at the last minute, Meredith, Madia, and Tula Lotay ended up pulling out new covers for me that we could incentivize, which was an amazing thing to to have people of
Wow.
that caliber who are like, sure, I'll drop everything and try to help you with this problem that's entirely your own fault. Um, and so that's amazing. But we ended up with 10 variant covers if you include the founders special that only the founders can get. And I that's hard. That's hard to figure out. That's hard to understand. I mean, my very first experience at a comic shop was my brother and I buying, they weren't new on the rack. They were like on the wall or whatever, but they were both X-Men #1. But he bought the one with Cyclops on the front and I bought the one with Gambit and Rogue, of course, predictable even back then. And we'd been looking through the issue or whatever, and we were in the car driving home, and I was like, hey, that's my book. Not like don't read my book, but like I wanted to read my book. And he's like, this is my book, this is the story I was reading. Yeah, that was our introduction to variant covers. We had the same comic. So I think it's really hard. And the way the trades are collected and the way things get renumbered, it's really hard. You really got to be interested to put it in. But I guess what I would say to anyone is, if you take a little time to find the stuff that really excites you, it's so worth it. Like, more than almost any hobby. It really, like, it'll break your heart sometimes, but it'll keep you coming back because it's really incredible stuff that's being done there. All
Mm.
kinds of stories. There's such a misnomer for people who don't know about comics, that including, my mom struggles with this, where in America it becomes synonymous with superheroes, but there's so much more than that out there. It's such a variety.
Mm. Absolutely. Absolutely. What would you say? Was there a writer that when you were first starting to read and getting into the space a little bit that you'd follow when you were first getting into it?
I wish I had a better answer to this. it took me a while to figure out to follow creators.
Yeah.
I always say that, you hear people say in movies and television all the time, like, I'm a fast learner and blah blah blah. And I always think, I don't know if everyone's lying about that. I'm not a fast learner. No. I am very good at like figuring something out and then doing it really well. I find competence in jobs like highly important. So I'm really interested in figuring it out and doing it right. But I would never be like, oh, I'm going to pick that up right away. No, no, no. First of all, I'm too old. I don't pick anything up right away. Second of all, I just don't think whatever my limitations are, and I mean, I think sometimes it can end up helping you, but it can also be a weakness. But for me, it took a really long time for me to like I didn't know all those books I was reading, those back issues of X-Men were Chris Claremont. I would
Mhm.
notice it sort of, but I wouldn't really pay attention. It took a while. I don't think it was until I was in my mid 20s that I really started becoming fans of specific artists, and it was always more indie stuff. I'm not saying I didn't care about who was writing the Marvel comic, and I would pay attention once I noticed, like, oh, I really like this in particular, like I must like Brian K. Vaughan or I must like Greg Rucka, and so then I would start picking up more of their stuff and I would get smarter about it. But yeah, there was a whole beginning process there where I was much more like, did Jim Lee draw it? Okay, I'll read it. Like, where I was much more prioritizing the artist over the writer. And it's a little bit true today for me too, though. I mean, I know everyone's a little different here, but I I don't know. I don't know if it's true if I can read something terrible with great art. I do feel like bad art turns me off faster than bad writing. Um, but maybe that's just a self-defense mechanism.
No, I totally agree with you in terms of when you're first getting in, you kind of don't realize it, and then the more you read and the more you pick up, you just start noticing stuff. I think
Yeah.
what was it? I was reading a free comic book day issue for Avatar: The Last Airbender, and I saw Meredith had a comic in there, but it instantly recognized her art because she has a very distinctive
Yeah.
style. And
Yeah.
same thing when it comes to like Scotty Young's art or Peach Momoko's art, you start when you first get in, you really start noticing the styles and just everything that goes into it, and you learn what you like, maybe what you don't like, and that's almost a whole nother side to it,
Yeah.
where when it comes to the art.
Yeah. For sure. And I just think it's easier to more quickly identify, like part of the reason that I think part of the reason a picture's worth 1,000 words is a saying that we all know, other than being true, is because it's instantaneous, right?
Hmm.
You look at an image and you just have a feeling about it immediately, like regardless of whether you flip past it or you examine it for an hour. Uh, it's incredibly visceral and palpable and immediate. But you're not going to feel that way about writing. You have to ingest it in a different way. And so I guess I feel like I can look at a comic and immediately see the art and go, that's way for me, that's way not for me, or like maybe, okay, let's see. But with writing, you really have to get in there and try it before it's you can't get that immediate hit. And I think that can be tricky for people. I think I think it can make it easy to prioritize the wrong things when you're trying to find something you love. But I do think I would encourage anyone, um, to not be like me and, pay attention to the writers and artists as soon as you can. Like, really start clocking that stuff because it will
Mhm.
make a difference. You'll notice, oh, I'm picking up these all the time from this guy. I find this guy really funny. Or, this guy is super into action, but I don't really like the emotional stuff that he does here, and it will really, it will shorten at least the learning process. I think if you're really paying attention to those things, you will learn so much faster, and it'll make those growing pains of figuring out how the industry works a lot easier, I think. um, it's always better, in my opinion, at this point, to follow creatives than characters. Not that you shouldn't buy, if Spider-Man's your favorite character, buy every book of his, that's great. But Spider-Man is ultimately defined by Marvel Comics, and they let
Mhm.
people come in and add their voice to those stories. But at the end of the day, whatever that person is doing, it has to toe that line. And so sometimes those stories are going to let you down because you're not interested in the direction Marvel's going. And that's not anybody's fault. It's not your fault. It's not
Mm.
Marvel's fault. It's just maybe not where you're headed. But writers writers like the same themes. They explore the same themes over and over again. They do it in different ways. They hopefully do it in fascinating ways. They hopefully find new corners of those messages and spin them off into other things. But if you really liked something someone wrote, there's a good chance you're going to like another thing they wrote. It's all in that brain together, you know?
Mm.
So
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
really do think that ignoring variant covers and paying attention to creator credits definitely can help you shorten the line to becoming a pro at how comics work, you know?
Saves money too. So let's talk about your new book coming out, Black Cloak, which is a Substack book, and I am on your Substack, and I have read. I don't even know how many issues I've been out on there already, but it's been a few, and
Well,
it's been fantastic. And I think the best way I can describe it is it's a sci-fi fantasy detective murder mystery set in like a fantastical world where the great evil has passed, but there's still life and there's still problems and crime, and that's where these detectives, the Black Cloaks, come in to solve a mystery.
I think that's a great summary. I think I'd like to bring you on all my other podcasts to do that for me because you did it better
I
than
will
me.
write that out for you and I'll send it your way.
That's a great summary. I think, yeah, I mean, a little bit of it is just inspired by, the story always ends, if you're in um Lord of the Rings, Return of the King, it
Mm-hmm.
ends and we won, that's the end. Well, what after that? I'm interested
Mm-hmm.
in how do you build a functional society after that. So this is a little bit that sort of experience, like in a fantasy world where all the disparate creatures, or most, came together to vanquish the great evil. They
Yep.
succeeded against all odds, and now they got to just keep living together. And a lot of them hate each other. They don't get along. They're all sort of our conceit is that basically everything that's left is in the last city in the known world. Now, how much that's true or not, I think is a question mark, like what's really out there beyond the city walls. But for the purposes of Black Cloak, these first 6 issues, this first opening story, it all takes place within those borders. I mean, I guess you could argue the lagoon is sort of open, but it's still within the walls. So, yeah, it's what kind of trouble can we get into in this world? And this first story is a very detective procedural type of story that starts with a murder, and we're sort of breaking the case. But where it's headed, I think you can feel from pretty early on, it has big ramifications for this entire city and for everyone who lives there. It's not just a run of the mill murder. So
I think
high stakes.
the thing that really drew me into this was your world building and how usually in a fantasy story there's a big prologue, or every time you turn a corner another big prologue. This you just throw a reader straight in. We have like one page, sets up scene, you're in, and you learn more about the world. You know, when Phaedra kind of goes to another corner in the world, you'll learn about that section and so
Yeah.
on and so forth. So it expands as the character is going and expanding her case in this mystery. You are also expanding the world itself, and I think that's so impressive, especially considering, like I said, in fantasy stories it's just words, 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 history of this tree, the history of this rock. We're
Yeah.
not doing that here.
No, I'd love to say it's because I'm like super innovative and cutting edge and everyone's going to be doing it. But the plain fact of the matter is, I don't like that in my stories. I don't like it. I've always had a bit of a problem with fantasy, and it took me years to figure out
Mhm.
why. Well, and we're talking about prose, not comics here. But,
Yes.
and it was, I don't want to read 3 paragraphs, like you said, about the old tree. Like, and honestly, if it's part of the plot, I want it to be integrated in a different way. It's just not for me. I don't want to read a huge prologue. I'm not saying those things are always bad or you can't do them well. It's just not to my taste, and it's what I
Yep.
prefer not to do. So this was a little bit experimental. Again, we're not reinventing the wheel here. Other people do this, but for me, this was my first try with building a brand new world like this from scratch. And I just, like you said, I just wanted to dump people in almost like they'd crash landed in the city, and now they got to figure it out on the fly the same way as everyone else does. um so I love that. I love that you get it. I think it won't be for everyone. I think that's probably true too. Some people miss that, or some people want more details. But I'm more like, yeah, we showed you this really cool like arcade, and it's lit all in neon, and are we going to go back to it? Maybe there's a whole story there, or maybe it's just an arcade. And we've got all these neighborhoods within the city, and it's tons of cool stuff to explore. And I mean, I hope people really love it, because if people really respond to it, then I think we'll get a chance to explore every corner that we want you know but
Yeah,
even if we
I
only just
really,
do
yeah. Go ahead.
these I mean, even if we only just do these six, I don't think that's what's going to happen, but I think it's a great story. I think people who find it will love it. I really do.
Yeah,
And I think
I mean, I
I think
really, really dig this.
thank you. Thank you. I want to, we haven't really talked about Meredith, so I just want to say, like, her contribution to that is
Mm,
so integral. You said before that she's got a really unique style, and I truly agree
yes.
with that. I think it's one of the things that I've been telling this story a little bit as I've been doing interviews, that when we were first talking about this project, and I she expressed a little hesitation when I was like, I would like to do fantasy with like crazy creatures and magic and technology sort of fighting itself or fighting each other. I was like, but I'd like to give it sort of a Blade Runnery, like a more futuristic sci-fi sheen. And she was super into that, but she was worried about some other things she'd seen. She was like, oh, maybe they're doing the same thing. And so we were sort of looking at it, and we did our due diligence to make sure we were, not doing something someone else was doing. And I felt fine about it. But honestly, even when she mentioned it, I wasn't super concerned, because I knew that at least visually, there was no way whatever she did was going to look like something anyone else had done, because she just doesn't. She just has this, she also has a style that, even though she's a big fantasy fan, I think her style is pretty atypical for most fantasy, because it's very like clean and sharp. And it's spare in a lot of places. Like, it relies on shapes and color a lot more, and it's really cool looking. Again, like someone who maybe wants exposition saying it's not for everyone, I think
Mm.
her art and my story is not for everyone. But I think the people who find it, who are into these kind of things, I don't know, I think it really sings, and I'm glad it's worked for you. It means a lot.
Yeah, well, you've worked with Meredith before. We mentioned earlier in Heart in a Box. How vital is that kind of like that relationship, that experience working on a previous title, going into this, and now you have a relationship already and can kind of push each other to do better in certain ways. And did that happen at all?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the funny thing is, I think the places I push Meredith the most on Black Cloak are color.
Mm,
She's a very talented natural colorist. Like, her instincts are spot on. But like, sometimes, I think it's just, you need that outside eyes to look at it and be like, this is great, but that should be blue, or this is great, but I think you can go further, or this is perfect, you just went far enough. You need that from people you trust, and I do think that she trusts me, and I think we have a good working relationship. Ironically, on Heart in a Box, color was also our biggest problem, but that was because we tried this really ambitious thing where the color sort of changes in her and in her world.
mm-hmm.
Like, she actually is like desaturated at some point, and then she sort of warms up to full color as you go. And it's like a brilliant thing that I'm really glad we did. And Meredith either suggested it or was super into it when we suggested it, but it did very much become like an albatross where we were fussing with the colors so much. It was very hard for her. She was a champ about it. She did not complain. She just got it done. But I felt bad a lot, because, especially when you're working on an indie book and nobody knows who you are, it was like she was doing that all in her spare time, while she was trying to pay the bills in other ways. So, um, it was crazy. But so I said to her when she came on this, I was like, I promise we won't have the color problems. And then, of course, the first things I'm pushing her on, I'm like, man, I think you could do more. I wanted to be like, she is gonna leave. But she's been very good about it. And I try to always be reasonable. And I think I'm pretty sure she's always agreed that where we end up is better. But for this because you're on the Substack, but for people who don't know, we did a couple process posts specifically where we showed off the color transitions from like where we start to where we end up, and it was pretty amazing.
So definitely go check out the Substack, everyone, if you are listening, because you get a whole bunch of behind the scenes work on whether it is Black Cloak or some of your other work at Marvel. What has your experience on Substack been like with some of these Substack projects?
With mine, or you mean with reading other people's stuff?
A little bit of both.
Okay. So I've been super impressed with a lot of the offerings on there. I talk a lot about Chip's stuff. I think hit both Newburn, which is coming out with Image this week, I think the trade is so incredible. I feel like not enough people are talking about that book. It's so hard to do like a really smart done in one detective thing, and here he's doing it. It's so good. And of course it's drawn by Jacob Phillips, which is, like could you have more comic book royalty than that, right? So I'm a big fan of that, but I even more than that, I love his public domain, which is his sort of right.
It's so good.
I mean,
It is
I don't
so good.
I love it. That is very much a book that's not for everybody, right? I mean, it's not, it's a much more indie title but it's really about the comic industry. And I don't want to say all that stuff is 100% true, but I think, if you're reading the book, look at who's writing it. That dude has been in all the rooms, so he knows he knows what he's talking about.
Yeah. I'd say Substack is where, and this is my pitch for anyone who's curious about just like looking into Substack as a reader looking for artists. It seems like a place where passion projects come to life.
I totally agree with
Would you
that.
agree?
I think, yes, 100%. I think people are trying really interesting stuff there, and not everything's going to work, and print comics are not going to go away, but it's still a really cool opportunity to see people doing it. I mean, I don't Black Cloak and The Cull, which is my other title that's coming out in 2023 with Mattia De Ulias, neither of those exist without the Substack opportunity for me. 100%. I owe Substack. There's no way. I couldn't get I just couldn't get enough time or finances together to step back enough from other work that was paying the rent to be able to do some of this longer term sort of passion stuff. And I'm not stopping the other stuff. I have some announcements that'll be coming in the next year that are really exciting about that, but the creator owned stuff, like, I'm so thankful I got the opportunity because it really is stretching my wings and getting to try out and learn a lot of stuff.
What's been
Sometimes
the
the
biggest
hard way.
challenge you'd say?
Um, the biggest challenge hasn't been the Substack stuff, honestly. It's been that Charles Beecham is my editor on those two books, and he's been incredibly helpful and wonderful. But it ended up being, I thought he was going to be helping me through the printing part of the process, like with the image stuff, which I've never done before and which is very tough. I mean, it's not very, everyone's very helpful. And I'm sure once you do it a couple times, it's like old hat. But for someone like me who's building a thing that's publishing on Substack and then is having to go back and then do slightly different files for a print thing and blah, 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 there was just a lot. And I didn't really think I'd be doing it. I think the writer typically doesn't do. I mean, they do some of what I'm doing, but they don't do all of it. But just because of the nature of how things were with the deal and the other projects Charles had going on, it ended up falling on me, and I was really it was a lot. And that's ended up being the biggest challenge. I mean, there were other like more sort of funny challenges, like when we first started out, and you probably remember this. Like, I mean, we took a poll of the Substack people about whether they
Yep.
wanted smaller pieces or bigger pieces, and resoundingly the answer was they wanted bigger pieces, which was great for me. But like, that's the secret reason that Black Cloak #1 is 51 or 52 pages or something of story content instead of 20, is because we wanted the right ending for the first issue, but because we were playing with the idea of chopping up into smaller pieces for Substack, we just ended up with this huge oversized issue. But I hope that'll be a great benefit, because it's a really great way, especially if you're going to do the world building the way we are, where you
Mm.
just sort of sink or swim. I do think more pages is very helpful, as far as a reader feeling like not only did they get their money's worth, but that they really have had the time to like swim around in that world a little bit. If it had been 20 pages, it might have felt a bit thin or something. I don't know. Um, but so yeah, we there have been little challenges like that. Like initially, I don't think there are no double page spreads in the first issue, and that's because Substack, when we first started, they weren't really formatted for that yet. So, but then they figured that out and it was cool, and so we've added it in. So like there were little challenges like that, but none of them were bad. They were all really reasonable, and like the kind of challenges that you learn something or it pushes you into something better, so all good.
Yeah. Well, another book you have coming out soon that has been teased on the Substack is The Coal. What can you tell us about The Coal?
So the call is with co-creator, artist, colorist Mattia De Ulias, who I did Jessica Jones with. And he's got, Meredith's got this very spare, cartoony, sharp, tight, color-based style. And I would say the only the only similarities these guys have as artists, other than being terrific people, is that they're both brilliant with color in different ways, because Maddie has got this incredibly realistic style, but he does all of his stuff as like painted, digital painted art. So it's just really, truly incredible stuff. The Cull is basically a story of five sort of best friends that live in a coastal town who, after graduation, they go off one morning, or middle of the night really, to hike to this rock on the pretense that they're going to shoot this short film, and just have like a little last adventure before the world pulls them in different directions. And all is not what it seems. They find things they did not expect, and everything goes to shit.
Something happens.
Yeah. I mean, you don't get a book called The Cull and have it be all rainbows and daisies. So my kids are
Yeah,
going
it's just
through
the
it.
everyday
My kids
life.
are going through it. I will say that issue 1 is probably the most spare issue I've ever written. It's largely silent for the first half, like very little
Okay.
words. But I will say to anyone that gets their hands on it, when they do, every single thing Maddie is drawing is important. So just because I didn't put words in there, that beautiful borderline photorealistic style is telling you a lot. So pay attention.
Well, that's the important thing, and that's the beauty of this medium, is that it is a wonderful combination of words and pictures. And sometimes the words have to you get really great dialogue, but the beauty of it is the pictures have to portray the emotion or the story, and just it silence sometimes is better.
Yep. I mean, one of my favorite things to do in a lettering pass is go delete this. We don't need it. Like, and that's just because the artist did everything we need. Like, we don't need that tacky um sound effect that I didn't want here anyway, but that we needed to convey something. Maddie drew it so well; it's perfectly understandable what it is. We don't need it. We were gonna put these lines of dialogue in so and so's mouth, but that expression Meredith drew tells us everything we need to know, and it's more
Yep.
powerful that way. Let it sit there. But that's not for everybody. I like to think that's really high IQ comics, like people who really take their time and are paying attention. For people who are a bit more cavalier about their stories, which I think there are people out there, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But to them, sometimes a silent panel is like, I don't know, like they're not getting enough of their money's worth. That's definitely not my philosophy, but there's a million comics with 1,000 word balloons in them if you want. Like, they're all there for you.
Yes, they are. You don't have to look too far in early comics to just see words, and you're just looking like, whoa.
And like, I don't want to portray myself like I've never overwritten or anything. It's certainly a problem. We all run into it, and God knows I love dialogue and jokes, so it can get you.
So also on your Substack, we mentioned before, you can read up on some backstories of these characters. You can read more up on just the process of how things work. And that includes everyone's favorite land shark. It's Jeff. We need to get more merch out there.
So cute. I mean, we really do. We really do. I just did a post today. Finally, I got back to posting, and I just did a post about the It's Jeff print edition, and I was
congratulations on that.
Yeah, I'm so excited. But I was jokingly saying that every single person should pre-order this, because won't it be hilarious if like Jeff beats Spider-Man and Batman for the month of March?
Please, deserves it.
I thought about
deserves
saying,
it.
I probably should say, maybe I'll put it on Twitter, that like, listen, you guys say you want your merch, here's how you get it. Put this thing above 100,000 for print copies, and someone at Marvel their heads will turn. So
I've been saying this vocally, very vocally. Marvel has a Grogu on their hands, a baby Yoda, if you will, with Jeff the Land Shark.
I know. I mean,
it's right there.
They clearly know it, because they don't just greenlight, little series or whatever for no reason.
Mm-hmm.
So they clearly know they've got something there. But yeah, I think they should be speeding it up a little bit. Not only because these things tend to jump the shark, but just because there's a lot of demand right now. I mean, yeah, no pun, intended. But I do think that, that two-parter we did this year that showed all those toys. I mean, the note to Gray Hero, I gave her some suggestions, but then I was like, basically any merch you'd like Marvel to make, let's put it in here and show them how it's done, So it was very fun.
How did It's Jeff, or should I say It's Jeff, get started? Because it just seems like such one of those, how has this not been done before type of ideas.
You mean a land shark, or you mean a land shark for kids silent strip?
Yes. Well, I really want to say it's for kids. It's all ages.
It's all ages, but it's certainly that thing we were talking about before, where it's a good way to build the younger audience, right? If you give them something to love. And I've heard from so many parents who say they read it with their kid, and it's their kid's favorite thing. And most of those parents are also saying, please God, do more. We can't read these same 20 for the rest of our lives. But sorry, my cat is, come on, buddy. You're really being a dick. It's just going for some kind of,
mine's climbing in the closet right now. We're both in the same boat.
I think we were seeing some real fan excitement over it, and I kept sort of writing him into things where it would work, and they just came to me and they're like, hey, do you want to do this? I was like, I 100% want to do that. I was like, but it's got to be the right artist. And they were like, what are you thinking? I was like, well, Guri Hero's the dream. And they were like, that's our dream too. Stand by. And then we just didn't even talk about it anymore. And they came back to me and like they were in. And I think it's important to credit Guri Hero here too, because in addition to, there's certainly now the definitive Jeff artist, which is it should be. No disrespect to Daniele Di Niccolo, who helped me first create Jeff. But they just have done so much. It's become the way he looks, and he's sort of morphed over time a little bit, as characters do. But they really loved him, like, independent of anything else. Nobody was telling them, as I understand it, to draw him into things, but they were just drawing him into things. They were like, oh, here's Jeff on a coffee cup. Here's Jeff on Spider-Man's t-shirt. Here's Jeff on Spider-Man's boxer shorts. Here's a framed photo of Jeff in someone's house. Like, just really, really building
Yeah.
the lore of Jeff on their own just because they thought he's cute and fun. And so I think it's really a credit to them that we got the series, honestly.
So, for those who don't know what Kelly is referring to, and this was in mid 2020. So, this was still during
Pandemic.
COVID pandemic. This was during lockdown.
Yeah.
There was a book very much like this going out, Guri Hiro made. And in the background of everything, every single issue had Jeff.
Yeah.
Somewhere. Hidden in the background, as Kelly mentioned. And
like Where's Waldo Jeff.
Yes. Exactly.
Very fun.
Oh, man. Write down, where's Jeff? Write that down.
I mean, yes. It's Jeff. Where's Jeff? Oh, yes. That should be a book right now. Oh, man. I gotta email Marvel. Yeah, I gotta email Marvel.
So how you teased on Twitter, and you don't have to go into details on this because secrets are secrets and things can't get out there yet, but there is a project that you just got approved recently.
Oh my God.
And I am curious how that process goes along.
As far as
just pitching, like just concept, like pitching a story and it getting approved.
Well, it can really go a million different ways. I mean, for example, one thing that I will probably be talking about, I won't be getting into super details, but one of many reasons why the Substack has been dark for a little bit. There were a whole slew of reasons, including some illness. We had some people on the team have even some deaths in the family, like, just nothing, life. It's life. Life has been happening, and sometimes it's not great, so we've had a few things happen, but one of the things that I was both putting off because I was putting more effort into Substack, and then it became all consuming and everything else got put on hold, was I was pitching an event for Marvel. And it's not going to happen, so don't get excited. And I think it's okay that it's not going to happen. It's just not really the right timing. I think there's going to be something else similar, sort of too close in proximity or whatever. And so these things sort of happen. I mean, you're irritated because it took a lot of time to put something like that together, but these don't always work. And I've actually been incredibly lucky. Like most writers I know do a lot more pitching than I do. Some of that's just a different style. Like some people like to come with more ideas that are less fleshed out. I prefer to come with one idea that I'm convinced is the right idea, as opposed to letting them sort of choose. I guess that old graphic design motto, like don't show the client anything you don't want to do. I'm coming from that school of thought. So, but yeah, I mean, it was a lot of wasted time and effort, and maybe I can repurpose it someday into something else or whatever, but probably not. Probably it's just a bunch of work I did for free that didn't work out, but it's sort of how this goes. I mean, yeah, so I mean, it's Jeff. I didn't have to pitch, which is great. Black Widow, Marvel came to me and were like, "Do you want to do this?" And I had pitched sort of on it 2 years prior to that, so I was sort of just ready for that. But yeah, I mean, ever since I first got brought in, most of the books have sort of come to me more than me chasing them. But I think some of that is just the practicality of there are not as many female writers, and so there are certain books that they really want me for, and so they prioritize that. So I think that's prevented me from pitching so much. My pitching at other companies that aren't Marvel is a lot more limited, but it seems to be a similar process. I mean, the thing I was talking about, which I really cannot say, it will come out in 2023, but it's a while. It's a while before they're really going to be able to talk about it. I honestly, when I look at the pitch, I sort of can't believe anyone greenlit it. I mean, I can because I put all the best characters in it.
Oh man, that's a tease.
Someone must have looked at it and been like, "Holy crap! I want to see those 5 or 6 characters together. Let's do this." But I really was just sort of overcome with this feeling the other day of like, I can't believe I'm going to get to write this thing. And then I got freaked out because, that's what you do. But
naturally.
Yeah, that's how it goes. So yeah, I mean, I think in this case, we'll see. I think my first script is due in January. So, I think maybe they'll start teasing something in I don't know. Probably summer is going to be the
Okay.
earliest they really want to start talking about it, which is going to be hard for me. Very hard.
You'll be
Because
putting
other,
little
yeah,
little hints in all the backgrounds of any book coming out between them.
yeah, yeah, for sure.
So we have a good friend of the show from comicbook.com, Matt Aguilar, and him and I bond constantly over your Captain Marvel book. And I messaged him the other day and I said, if you could ask Kelly Thompson one question, what would it be? And he gave me this word for word. I copy and pasted this.
Okay.
If you could write a spin-off series with one of Captain Marvel's supporting cast, who would it be? And why is it Spider-Woman and Binary Team-Up series that's perfect strangers meets Columbo?
I'd probably have to go more Rockford Files just because we've been
Ooh.
watching that. But Jess is a little bit of a dirtbag, so I actually think the Rockford Files thing is pretty good for her. I listen. I love Binary. I created her sort of. I mean, she's new, so she's mine. But we stole all her cool shit from from what? Gosh, was it Cockrum that did the Binary costume?
Yes,
Okay,
I think so.
thank God
I
I
think
got
so.
that right. Well, now you're making a face. Now we're both screwed. Anyway.
I
um
trust my brain on this one. I'm fairly certain.
so, L'Oreal, Binary, I'm obviously very attached to them. I have been very tender feels for them. But if I'm honest, I would rather see Hazmat and Jess.
Mm,
And those would be very fun Rockford Files vibes. I don't think Hazmat is not enough of a dirtbag to play Angel. I don't know if anybody's familiar with the Rockford Files, but he's one of the funniest characters I've ever seen, and you cannot trust him to do a single goddamn thing. So I think Hazmat is a lot better than that, but we'll have to figure out how she would fit in there. But yeah, I would totally be down for Spider Jess Rockford Files nonsense.
that's perfect because one of the reasons him and we had him on the last show, and I think we talked for 20 minutes about how much we love your Captain Marvel run. It is
Oh,
my personal all-time favorite Captain Marvel run,
wow.
and I think it is because, and we both agreed on this, it's because of the family and friends and just the core group you've put around Carol
Thank
has
you.
been so, it's brought great things out of her, it's brought great stories out of her. It's just such a dynamic we haven't really seen with her, and it's just brought out the best.
Yeah. Thank you. That means so much. Well, and this sort of goes back to the thing we were first talking about following writers, because writers, if you like something, they tend to return to the similar themes. And
Mm,
I'm sure anyone who's paying even the smallest amount of attention to me can tell that my themes are women, sisterhood. I like seeing women helping women. I like seeing women sharing power with other women. They can share it with men too, but I admit my priority is more about seeing women in those spaces, especially in superhero spaces, because it's underrated. I mean, I saw a few people laughing about the fact that Gambit is the only man on the current Carol X-Men team in the arc we're doing right now. And I mean, no one was being mean about it or anything, but I just wanted to be like, "Oh, you mean like every fucking superhero book I read for most of my life where one token woman was there?" I mean, we didn't do that on purpose with Gambit.
mhm.
It was more a factor of who was available and who fit and what we needed. Um, but I just found it funny that people get so, even when they're not being critical, like we've got these blinders on to these things. Like, I mean, really, X-Men was a huge, wonderful exception, and is probably why so many people of my age and similar ages are such crazy fans of the X-Men,
Absolutely.
because that was a book where you could pick it up and there were five women all talking to each other, all, men were around, maybe
Hmm.
I don't know, it just didn't feel that same way. But even Avengers, for the longest time, it was like, maybe you got a Black Widow or a Captain Marvel or a Scarlet Witch, but if you got more than two, you were really lucky. It's just the way it was
Yeah,
for a long time. So yeah, I'm really interested in women. I'm interested in how they interact and why. And I don't think it has to be a special event for them all to sort of show up in a book together. Like, it's just, there's so many great ones out there. Why wouldn't they all be showing up in each other's stuff? But it was important to me. I love Carol in space. I'm glad we're there right now. I think you cannot take out, nor should anyone try to take out the thing in her that wants to go up. She belongs
mm,
in the stars. But they'd been doing that for a really long time when I came on the book. And so I felt like we needed a change of pace. And I felt like the thing as a fan for me that had been missing the most was just the connection with Earth and with some core characters there, which is why I went to sort of building slash rebuilding, relationships she'd already had and like trying to focus on them. And it apparently worked because it's a really long Captain Marvel run and certainly my longest run in comics.
We're getting close to 50 issues with that, aren't we?
We are. I am writing 48 and plotting 50 right now. Um, which will be like like a oversized celebration issue.
Naturally.
Yeah, of course. And after that, I don't know. I'm probably not allowed to talk about it. I think I'd probably get in trouble if I said anything one way or another what comes after 50, but
Fair enough.
yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah. It's been an incredible run. It's wild. It's wild to me.
One of my favorite runs you've done is a one that you won an award on, an Eisner Award. Has that gotten old? Have you ever gotten tired of hearing Eisner Award winner?
It will never get old. I sometimes
Good.
feel a little bad,
Good.
but
don't ever feel bad for that.
No, like it can feel a little pretentious or whatever, but it's like we're all just out here hustling, man. So I got to use what I've got, and I don't have a lot of people can be like New York Times best-selling, so many weeks straight, or Jonathan Hickman just has to say his name. I don't know, like, so we all gotta use what we got, and I won an Eisner, so you're damn right.
Deservedly so for a damn good book. That was Black Widow.
I do think it's pretty cool that we won for Black Widow. I mean, you love to win for a creator-owned project, obviously, because that's even more of your heart and soul. But I love every inch of that Black Widow book. I loved the team. I loved what we were doing. I loved it. And to see a mostly female team get that win on a Marvel book, which, I'm not saying Marvel can't win those. They can, but we did. But it's not that, it doesn't feel that typical. I felt going in, we had zero shot. I was 100% sure we were losing. So much so that it was Al Ewing that told me we won. He was like, "Hey, congratulations." And I was like,
crazy.
What? And he goes, "You won the Eisner, dummy." And I was like, "Are you kidding?" He was like, "No." And he sent me a link. And I was like, "Holy crap." Because I just wasn't even watching. I was so sure we were out of it because it was mostly creator-owned books we were up against. But honestly, it felt right because Marvel was very supportive. They've typically been very supportive, but I think maybe there were some skeptics that like it was going to pull it off. For example, it was only greenlit through 5 issues to start. And yeah, I mean, I think we convinced them. They were like, it's really good, and they really let us go. And I know 15 doesn't sound like enough, and I'm still trying to submit for a little finale thing. I feel very concerned that the more time that passes, the less likely it is. However, just sometimes it's not within your control. I was doing that event pitch and it was sort of taking precedence. And also, there were things I was trying to do in it that would affect the Black Widow pitch if I did it. So I sort of put it all in pause. I'm trying to get back to it now, but, I think it's a legitimate concern that Marvel could say, too much time has passed. And I think that's fair. I'm disappointed if that's how it goes because I think there's a good story here, but hopefully I can pull the pitch together in a way that will really convince them that it's still worth going for it. So we'll see. Fingers crossed. I know there's a
fingers
lot of people...
crossed because I mean that whole run that you had on Black Widow is phenomenal. And the first arc, I've never seen a character like that. When your expectations are with the Black Widow book, it's Red Room. Red.
Yeah.
Not the case in this one. And that's what made it so cool. And like, I had no idea what was going on half the time. And when I finally clicked, I was like, wow, this is nuts. Yeah. It was so well written.
Thank you. I mean, listen, that was the first thing I said to Sarah when she came to me. Sarah Burnside, my editor, when she came to me and she's like, "Hey, we have an opening on Black Widow. What do you think?" And I was like, "Yes, 100%. I'm dying to get my hands on that character." I was like, "But it's okay for you to say no to me after I tell you this." And she's like, "What?" I was like, "I will not be touching anything Red Room." I was like, I love that origin story. It's a great origin story. I guess that's why we keep going back to it over and
Mhm.
over and over again. I was like, I mean, we can tangentially, I don't want to pretend it doesn't exist or anything. I just don't want the stories to be about that. And she was like, sold, I agree. And I was like, yes.
Take
Again,
those
I
wins.
a couple people have been like, I don't know why you don't like the that's not it. It's just been done. And it's not even,
Mhm.
I'm not even trying to be like, oh, I'm some genius who wants to do something new. I just, it's hard to mine the same material for something interesting again. And I just wanted to push her in other ways. So I'm really glad we did. I wish we'd gotten more. I hope we'll get a little more still. But even if it just has to stand like that, I was pretty proud of it, especially that last arc. I felt like the first arc and the last arc, I feel like we really nailed that emotion and what I was going for. Um, the middle arc, I still love it, but I can see places where it's a little unwieldy. And we also had a little bit more trouble in the second arc balancing the art. We were very lucky to have the incredible Raphael de la Tour helping us in that second arc, but I had to change. We were trying very hard to keep Elena on, to let Raphael take sections that were like Lucy and Anya and stuff like that, and keep Elena on Natasha. And not because anyone was doing anything better, but just to keep some consistency within the way the story was told. And as a result, I ended up having to rebalance it a little bit. And so I'm a little unhappy with it. Like, I feel like Natasha is not forefront enough in some stuff, or I didn't push hard enough there. But in general, I love it. And I mean, Elena Casagrande, what can you say? Like, she and
Oh
Jordi
yeah.
Belair just killing every page, but especially those spreads. Um,
What
and
was that effect where it did it like I think it was once an issue where you'd see Natasha kind of all over the
yeah,
place.
it's called the Luca effect,
Yes.
where it's multiple figures of the same person. So like someone, for the listeners at home, like if someone's somersaulting through a space, like maybe you'd see them jump off, and then you'd also see them somersaulting, and then you'd see them kicking someone in the end, and it would all be in the same panel. I
Mhm.
love it. Not every other artist does. I try to put it in every book I work on if it makes sense, except for Jeff. Although now that I've said it, I sort of want to do it with Jeff. But I think that it's a really interesting challenge. My favorite thing about doing DeLuca effect became not only utilizing it, but seeing how different artists wanted or didn't want to do it. And some of that's what the story, there are different limitations within each story. I mean, you're going to get something better, in my opinion, out of Black Widow with that than you are Captain Marvel, simply because Black Widow is a different kind of fighter.
Mhm.
So doing it with Captain Marvel, you can still get a really cool page out of it, but it's going to be different than, Black Widow killing three guys on one page. So but yeah, we did it. Uh Basil Dua and I did it on Mr. and Mrs. X, and Prey Prez and I sort of did it on Rogan Gambit. Lee Jarbet and I did it a little bit on Captain Marvel on his first
Mhm.
arc that he did with me. Leo Romero and I obviously did it in Hawkeye. And yeah, it's been really fun to try it with different artists and see their approach to it. I love that kind of thing.
It's funny you mentioned Hawkeye because, and I think my editor in chief on Agents of Fandom is gonna be very proud of me for not bringing up Kate Bishop for 57 minutes because it is no secret who my favorite character in any medium is. So you've done Hawkeye, you've written my favorite book with Kate Bishop in it. Your
Aw,
voice for Kate is perfect.
thank
The
you.
run you did with her, perfect. I loved every single bit of it. And I just wanted to say thank you for that from any fan who is of this character
Aw,
for including your voice and putting it into her stories, adding to her stories. It just felt natural.
aw, thank you so much. I
So
mean,
just thank you.
That means a lot, and I do feel like I have a very good handle on Kate. I feel like I could pick Kate up anytime, and it'd be like sliding into another skin. It's just very familiar. But let's not be crazy. I very much built the bones of my Kate on what Fraction and
Yes.
Aja were doing, but even more
Mm-hmm.
what Fraction and Annie Wu were doing, because my theory, which you've probably heard me say before because you're a very nice supportive person who listens to me talk about things, um, is my theory, and I've not approved this. This is not Fraction approved. This is the Kelly Thompson only theory. I think he writes Kate in the David Aja issues as more as Clint sees her.
Mm.
And he writes her in the Annie Wu stuff the way Kate sees herself. That's my justification, because Clint's not there. And so the POV changes. The nature of
Mm.
who she is changes a little bit too. Like, she becomes a slightly different person in LA, away from her mentor, trying to do a different kind of thing. And so some of that's just the circumstances, I think. But I do think, because Fraction is such a strong writer, and you really get so much more wackiness from Kate once she moves west, I really do think that's like a solid theory about like why you see she's still consistent, but it's just different. It's like a slightly different flavor. And because we were doing Kate in the West Coast on her own, mostly without Clint, I wanted to stick with that. So we picked that ball up and ran with
And ran with it, did you?
it.
Because then she became a West Coast Adventure and fought Brodok and
Yes.
had a whole team
Yeah.
and had a little pet land shark for a little while.
Yeah.
It's natural stuff in the Marvel universe.
And we
Very,
did
very
get,
casual.
people forget we did get nominated for an Eisner for that Hawkeye too.
Mm-hmm.
That was my first nomination, was for that. So the category that we won a few years later for Black Widow, that was the category we were in for Hawkeye, Leo and I. I think I got nominated. That Hawkeye was also included when I got nominated in the writer category, so it overlapped, but yeah, that was our only nomination for that book. But I loved that book. It
And I
was
love that book too.
yeah,
It was great.
it was a real joy. It was a real joy.
If I ever see you writing Kate Bishop again in the near or distant future, I don't think I could pre-order that fast enough.
I'll keep that in mind.
Marvel. Kelly, thank you so much for coming on. I just want to say thanks again. Your voice in this space is so important. The work you've done in this space and comics is so important too, and it's so good. And I just can't wait to see what more you do. And I've been trying to go back and read some of your older stuff too. I mentioned Heart in a Box, that was excellent. So just thank you for all the work and everything you've done in the comic industry. Oh, and you have a novel as well.
I have two novels.
Not just two novels. You don't just do comics. I forgot to mention that.
I don't like to talk about it a lot because I feel terrible. Because The Girl Who Would Be King was a novel I published in 2012, and it became sort of a cult favorite. It's continually been optioned for TV or film, so maybe someday it will make it to the silver screen, but I wouldn't hold my breath. These things are very, very annoying. Anyway, and the other book, Story Killer, which I feel really bad about every time I talk about it, because I love it. I love the world, and it has a lot of really great fans. And I just can't, to write a whole novel on your own dime, there's just got to be enough money to float that. And it's really difficult to do. I am thinking about doing more Story Killer, though, because of Substack. And with that format, I think there might be an option to like republish the old edition, maybe like new version, and then start on the volume 2 or restart in volume 2. So we'll see. I'm optimistic there's novel work coming in the future, but it's tricky.
Well, that's a tease. That's what we'd call a tease. Kelly, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thanks
This
for
was
having
an
me, Damon.
absolute pleasure.
You were a delight. Thank you so much for having me.